Welcome back, everyone. Spring and summer is a time for new growth and taking bold action together. So we hope these stories can inspire you to live boldly, take wise chances, and with our friends and family, make a difference together. Today we will be reading A Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne, retold by Billy Aronson. So as we lean in with the spirit of adventure, grab a friend, like Jade here, and let's enjoy the story together. Chapter 6, The Shadow Knows. Axel is about to climb a mountain that's higher than 6 skyscrapers stacked on top of one another, or 200 houses piled on one another, or 1,500 doghouses. Mount Snuffles is about 5,000 feet high. As I gazed up at the white dome with snow on top, I couldn't imagine that we would ever really get there. We walked single file. Hans led the way as we trampled over gray rocks and patches of grass. Ahead I could see huge craters sticking up over the higher parts of the mountain. As we climbed, I thought how horrible it must have been when Snuffles erupted. I was sure that those tons of lava must have been heated by a tremendous furnace burning inside the earth. So why, I wondered, were we heading for that furnace? In spite of my fears, I marched onward like a brave, doomed soldier. The higher we got, the more difficult and dangerous the climb became. Stones broke loose under our feet, causing small avalanches. But nothing bothered Hans. He kept walking ahead as calmly as though we were strolling down a country road. After about 3 hours, I was exhausted, but we'd hardly get over the base of the mountain. We stopped for a quick breakfast and moved on. Now the gigantic mountain became so steep that it was impossible to climb straight up. We had to zigzag around, weaving our way. Often my uncle had to reach back and give me a tug to help me. We came to a wide field of slippery ice. It seemed impossible to cross, but as we moved to the side, we found a series of rocks leading across the ice. Like a monster luring us towards its mouth, Snuffles was giving us a flight of stone steps to guide us over the ice. By 7 that night, we found ourselves outside a towering crater. We were now 3,000 feet above sea level. At that height, it's so cold that there's snow on the ground all year long. Yes, even in June. Worse than the cold was the wind, which blew violently. My uncle and I were ready to rest by the crater, but Hans shook his head. When my uncle asked why, Hans replied with a single word. Mister. Miss who? I asked. Look there, my uncle answered. On the plain below, I saw a whirlwind of rock, sand, and dust rising up into the air. This fierce tornado, which the Icelandic people call a mistor, was sweeping across the mountain right towards us. Misters form when wind swirls around and around in a circle faster and faster, sort of like when I chase my tail. Of course, a mister is a lot more dangerous. It sends huge rocks flying in all directions, destroying everything in its path. Hagas! Hans cried. I didn't know what that word meant, but his gestures made it clear enough he wanted us to hurry around to the back of the crater. Though we were already exhausted, we hurried. About 15 minutes later, the whirlwind of sand smashed against the side of the mountain, right where my uncle and I had wanted to rest. If not for Hans, our bodies would have been ripped apart and scattered for miles in all directions. Hans didn't think it was safe to sleep outside the cone, so we continued our journey another 5 hours. After 11 that night, we finally reached the top of Snuffles. My entire body ached. The change in air pressure made my ears pop. I was in a terrible mood as we climbed into the crater where we were going to spend the night. Then I saw the midnight sun and was suddenly cheered. How lucky I was to be in Iceland on the day of the year when the sun really does shine at midnight. I watched the sun cast its pale rays upon towns that lay sleeping far below us. I'd heard that people come from around the world to see this magical, wondrous spectacle. Now I knew why. My bed, a pile of rocks inside the crater, wasn't very comfortable, but after a day of climbing, I slept deeply. The next morning, I rose and took in the incredible view. The world below looked like a giant painting stretched out before me. Deep valleys cut across one another in all directions. The valleys were sprinkled with lakes that looked like puddles, and the mighty rivers that bordered them looked no larger than streams. To the side, I saw rows of glaciers, huge masses of ice that reached across rows of mountaintops. A strange, wonderful, majestic feeling took hold of me. I forgot who I was, or where I was, or what I was doing. But I was quickly awakened from the dreamlike state when I heard Hans say, Skarters. There, off to the side, was the peak whose name was in the coded note. The shadow of this peak would help us find our way. At this moment, the shadow of Skarters was nowhere near the crater at the top of Snuffles, but we didn't need it to point our way yet. There was only one way to go, straight down into the mouth of the crater. The crater opening was about a half-mile wide and shaped like an upside-down cone. Though it didn't seem like it would be difficult to climb down into the mouth of the volcano, I wasn't looking forward to it. I'm climbing into the mouth of a cannon, I thought to myself. Let's just hope it's not loaded. Hans led us down into the crater. Rocks struck out along the walls of the crater, and we used those as steps and handholds as we descended. When we chanced to step on some that weren't solid enough to bear our weight, they would tumble into the bottom of the pit. As they hit bottom, the echo of the crash resounded like thunder. By afternoon, we reached the crater floor. When I looked up, I saw a circle of sky. Up in that circle, poking into the clouds, I saw the peak of Saknussemm. We were standing on a round plot of ground, the floor of the crater about a couple 100 feet wide. Along that floor, there were 3 shafts, like chimneys, through which Snuffles had blasted hot lava from deep inside the earth. My uncle looked around and suddenly shouted with joy, "Axel, come look!" he called. He pointed to the wall where I saw etched in that familiar code the name that was haunting my life, Arn Saknussemm. My uncle was thrilled to know that we were on the right track. I would rather have been on a different track, one that led home. How I longed to see Gretchen's smile, or taste one of our cook's omelets, or rest on my own feather bed. "Everything is falling into place," my uncle cried, pointing at the 3 shafts. I had no idea what he was talking about, until I noticed a shadow. The shadow of Saknussemm had entered the crater. As the sun moved through the sky, the shadow moved across the floor. Slowly, very slowly, it was inching along towards the 3 shafts. This distant peak was about to tell us which one of the 3 was the right one. We waited for minutes. It felt like years as the shadow crept across the floor. Suddenly, my uncle's joy turned to rage. The sky had clouded up. Rain clouds covered the sun. Saknussemm's shadow was gone. My uncle paced frantically. He pounded the crater walls. He commanded the clouds to move, and they did. As though taking pity on my uncle's misery, the clouds parted just enough to let the sun's rays pour across the floor of our pit, except for a small section blocked by a single peak. The shadow of Saknussemm was back just in time to point to the middle shaft. "There it is," shouted my uncle. "There is our path to the center of the earth." And so, on the 26th of June, at 1:13 in the afternoon, about a month after we'd left home, we began our real journey. Their trip from Hamburg to the shaft took them most of June. If the volcano doesn't behave itself, they're in for a very hot July. And that does it for Chapter 6. We'll see you next time for Chapter 7.